Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Exceptional People. My name is Will McClain. Today I am joined by Dr. Brandy Kelly. Brandy, it's been really cool kind of getting to know you and getting to know your work as I started to ask this question about what we are chasing here in education, to read what you've written about hope, and to listen to you and your guests talk about that has been really interesting. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me on this show. I've enjoyed talking with you so far, and I really look forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. So let's just jump right into it. I am too. This is exciting. All right. So my first question for you, Dr. Kelly, would be your system of hope centers on habits, optimism, purpose, and excellence. So which of those do you find leaders have the most difficulty in sustaining?
It's a really great question, Will, and I'm glad you asked it. So, in my experience, that optimistic outlook or that mindset piece, it seems to be the most difficult for people to wrap their minds around, to put into practice a mindset that really helps them do the incredibly important work that we need to be doing in schools. And it's difficult because of the high pressure environment that they're in. They're always kind of in that, boiling water, the day-to-day challenges, the budget cuts, staffing shortages, constant change. It gets really heavy. And so I think for leaders, sometimes staying optimistic or having a mindset of optimism and hope can be very challenging, especially in today's landscape of education.
It's interesting you said that about mindset too, because I wonder, we have to make a lot of decisions very quickly in a school building, and we
Mhm.
have our own mindset that we want to carry into. But
Yeah.
sometimes, like if I get hit with something that's pretty heavy, I feel like I need to change my mindset, and I don't think that's not the way to approach that. I don't think.
No, I agree with you. Your mindset needs to be really anchored in your values and what you prioritize, what you hold dear in this life. And you're absolutely right. Educators make, some would say, more decisions than any other profession, right? And so when you think about mindset and you think about the chronic stress that educators and leaders are consistently dealing with, think about that from a brain science perspective. High pressure environments um, really affect your prefrontal cortex, and that's what's responsible for that executive functioning. That's decision making, planning, optimism, and it becomes less active. And then the amygdala, how we process threat, fear, it becomes hyperactive, and it reinforces negative thinking patterns. We all have a default strategy. We all have a default mechanism. And being optimistic, having that optimistic outlook, that takes a lot of planning and purposeful decision making and intention. But when we're in those high stress decision making environments, it becomes difficult because we do revert back to the amygdala and we focus more on the negativity. That's just the way our brain is wired. So, in my system of hope, I talk about some very simple, practical strategies that leaders can put into place so that they are being purposeful and intentional about not reverting back to that default strategy or that default mechanism.
Right, because those low hanging fruits of anger and frustration and stress are the easiest for us to access.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
you brought up something, and I want to. So it's important for me to kind of slow down sometimes and understand that, like, yes, we're chasing hope and we're chasing joy, but let's take a pause and understand also too that it isn't always going to work. We're not always going to catch it, right? But the idea though is that it is a practice and that is deliberate. So if we could take a step back and actually talking about hope, HOPE, because I know that in your coaching and things like that, there do come times where leaders will come to you and say, my progress is slow, or my progress is reversed, or it has stopped. How do I keep my hope in these instances?
Mhm. And the short answer is not the answer. I know it's not the answer I wanted whenever I was in those moments when I was dealing with that frustration because we want results. We want to be high impact leaders. And Our people deserve it. Our students deserve it. But the fact of the matter is consistency compounds. And so we just have to identify one simple strategy and continually do that day over day. And by putting that into practice over time, that consistency is going to compound and you are going to get the results you want. But you almost have to look at that in terms of a backward design. What is it that you're wanting? Yeah, we're chasing hope, but when I'm chasing hope, what's that end result going to look like for me? Is that going to be more joy? Is that going to be a sense of hope? Is that going to be implementing something specific in my life every day? We really have to be intentional about what that future idea is. What are we trying to build here? And then by chasing hope, we're putting in those intentional practices, and then consistently that will compound and you will get more of whatever it is you're looking for, whether that be hope or joy or peace or purpose. But we have to backward design it.
And I love that, right? It isn't hope for hope's sake. There's a purpose. There's an outcome. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that.
100%. Yep.
Um, so I love bringing guests on because I want these to be conversations. This isn't PD. This isn't sitting in the library with a lukewarm bottle of water and mints. So um, your message comes from a very personal place. And some of your message includes, in your space includes grief and healing. And when we're talking with leaders, I mean, education is just a passionate place, right? And so when you're in a building full of leaders, how do you protect emotional sustainability, not just for yourself, but for the folks that you're working with?
That's another great question. You're knocking it out of the park here this morning, Will. So, like you said, for me, a system of hope came out of pain. My brother Brandon drowned when I was 15 years old, and it really changed our lives. But finding the good in that goes back to that mindset piece. Finding the the reason, I guess, that happened. That's the way I look at it. Was so life changing for me, and so in finding that purpose and leading with hope, it means I don't discredit the hard thing that happened. I don't discredit the fact that I dealt with pain or trauma or adversity. I rather integrated that into my life and I found the good. I think we always have to look for the good. And the good in that moment was the community. Our community came out and they looked for him day and night. My school community, they rallied around us. And that school community really gave me hope. They boarded a bus and came to Brandon's funeral during the school day. They did a memory book, and it really captured his mischievous spirit, his golden heart. They truly loved him, and that came through. And what we have to remember as leaders is we want to create spaces where we're fostering hope and joy and love because fear restricts, going back to the brain and how we operate, fear restricts and love expands. And we need to create spaces. Leaders need to create spaces in their school where we're fostering connection and compassion and community. We live in a world where people are hurting. There's a lot of people hurting. They're dealing with stress. They're dealing with exhaustion. They're dealing with burnout. As leaders, if we're consistently building spaces that foster connection and compassion, then we're going to get more out of our people. We're going to retain the good people that we have, and we're going to be able to accomplish the goals that we set for our organizations and our school districts.
Right. I, I love it. Right. Vulnerability is not a bad word.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't walk around. We have to maintain certain levels of professionalism and stay
Sure.
within our boundaries, but vulnerability and connection and showing your human side, those are not negative traits, in my opinion, and yours either.
No. And, some people do look at that as a weakness, and they are concerned that if we show too much of who we are, then people are going to use that against us. And let me be real. They may. They absolutely may. But at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself. And when you're not true to yourself, you start losing part of yourself. And then what's it all for? I talk about rooting all of this in your core values. That is so incredibly important to me. For me, it's faith, family, community, and service. And it is because of that pain that I dealt with early in life. And it's not a one and done proposition. It's not, I had that one difficult time in my life. You're going to face more than one, more than likely. I know I have. You know, my brother passed away, my mom passed away, my dad's dealing with Parkinson's now. Life can be very hard, both personally and professionally. So we have to have a very strong sense of who we are, rooted in our core values, what we hold dear. And the only way I was able to do that personally and how I help leaders do that through coaching is through that intentional practice of self-reflection to build self-awareness and improve that belief in oneself and belief in others, or I also call it self-efficacy.
If I was sitting down in the first 20 minutes of working with you and I was around a room with all of my other school leader peers here in Central Virginia, I would just put my pen down like 20 minutes in and be like, oh, hell yes, let's talk. Let's do it all day. All of you data people, let's go. You're in my world now, right? Like, yeah.
I love this. Yes.
Um, that's really great. And thank you for sharing that. To explain to people that vulnerability is not a bad word requires that we be vulnerable. And so thank you for going down that road with me. So it's hard to believe, I'm 20 years into this business. And I think a lot about like what happens in the next 20 years when I'm not around. So
Yeah.
when you think about the next generation of school leaders, because through your work and through your consulting and through your leadership, you've seen all kinds, all across the country, all different pockets of education. What do you hope that the next generation of school leaders chases that either we missed or that we may not know about yet?
hmm For me and my work, and this is born out of hard fought lessons, I say I learn everything the hard way. Um, I struggle just like everybody else, but there there are three types of hope in my mind. And chasing hope to me means we're chasing that sense of hope, that emotional resilience, just a belief that things can get better. Um, I want leaders to chase hope as a system of hope, that intentional action built on my system of hope, habits, optimistic outlook or mindset, purpose, passion, perseverance, and excellence. And then the third kind of hope is a spiritual hope. And the way I define that is just a deep purpose, the kind of hope that is really grounded in meaning, whether it's faith or a calling or a community impact. I want to encourage leaders to really articulate why they're doing what they're doing. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning says, if you know your why, you can withstand almost any what. And so that is so incredibly important. But the second part of that, Will, definitely, I want them to chase those three types of hope, but I also
Mm,
want them to chase hope, or I'm sorry, to chase wholeness, not hustle, wholeness, because we live in a society that glamorizes busyness.
mhm,
And a lot of people, especially leaders and educators, truly exceptional people, they get sucked into or can get sucked into that busyness as a badge of honor. And we can't have wholeness without truly understanding who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, and prioritizing not self-care is that buzzword that we all talk about, but just taking care of ourselves, just prioritizing rest and prioritizing unplugging. We are constantly plugged in. Communication is coming at us from every, direction every single day. We need to look at holistic wellness to prioritize the fact that we just have this one life. Let's make it count.
yep. You don't, there's no, on the day that we have to answer to the life that we've stacked up, there's no trophy for the number of hours you worked. So
No, no, no. And if you look at a person's career, okay, and this is sobering to me. When you decide that you're no longer in a job, and in Illinois, we had superintendents, I think it was last year, we had 3 superintendents in September at our state conference who had already passed away. One was a suicide, one was a heart attack, and the other one, I believe maybe 2 were heart attacks, if I'm remembering correctly, Will. But do you know within just a few months, those jobs are gonna be filled.
mm,
You know what's never gonna be filled? That person's role as mom or dad or sister or wife or husband or your family cannot replace you. And so, going back to my core values, if we say we value family, if that's a priority in our life, does our time and how we spend it reflect that? Because if it doesn't, we need to make some changes. And
mhm,
by chasing hope, we can implement changes. It doesn't mean we have to quit our job, or it doesn't mean that we have to make this major life altering decision. But what it does mean is that if we say we prioritize that, what habits are you implementing?
mhm.
Does your mindset reflect that? Are you really, truly tapped in to your why? And are you doing things every day, every week that light you up, that excite you, that fuel your passion and your purpose? Because if we're not living a life of excellence, continually getting better day after day.
That's it. That's it. That's all it is,
Mhm.
um, it is a practice because it's too easy, like we've talked about, it's too easy for the other things to win. Those negative emotions and those, when I hate even to say negative emotions, but just the emotions that aren't positive, right? There's a way to have emotions that aren't negative or positive. They're just stagnant.
Yeah.
Um, those are all very just too easy to access, and we have to be deliberate about the other things.
Yeah. And back when I was a school social worker, I would tell my students there are no good or bad emotions. It's what you do with it that matters. And so sometimes, when you are angry, for instance, anger comes from a place of fear, oftentimes. So let's self reflect,
Absolutely.
let's name it, and let's tame it, because that anger can fuel something good, or it can create some disastrous results. So let's name it, let's tame it, let's use it for the purpose that we want to create, the life that we want to build, because we can. We have that choice.
There's a lesson, we talk about the next generation of leaders. A lesson that I wish I had learned 20 years ago instead of right now with a 1 year old daughter is that
Mm.
all of the angst that I felt in the last year around my daughter had nothing to do with really anger or sadness or frustration. It all was fear that I cannot give this little beautiful thing and my wife every exactly thing that they need. And all of that stuff came from fear. And so that's a very personal example, but that same thing happens when I care about my staff, when I care about my students,
Yeah.
that fear of what am I not doing? When I care about my own professional legacy,
Yeah.
that fear gets in the way. And so your system of hope really helped kind of frame that for me, in a different way beyond the mental health aspect side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And Will, I think many of us, when we boil it down, whether it's perfectionism or people pleasing or trying to put those practices in place that it's going to give your family the life you want them to have, a lot of that is born out of fear. And so just understanding that through self reflection and self awareness and putting simple, practical strategies in place, it's truly life changing to create the outcomes we want to see.
So I'm super excited. We've got well, not we, you have a book study coming up, that I'm just lucky enough to be a part of. So I found your podcast just for my own, because I started reading about you, and I found you on Apple Podcasts, very easy. But do you want to get into like, can we talk about the book study real quick? Because I'm excited about
Yes.
that. Let's talk about the book and where to find that. And because, as I said, this was just for me a great way to take the things that I think about and talk about, and your system really helped package it for me. So where can people find us?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's sparkhopeedu.com. And I'm excited about this virtual book study. We are going to just have a nice time exploring the system of hope, learning more about each other, building a community of hope where we can foster this sense of hope that we talk about, a system of hope, and build a community of leaders who are able to lift people up and to really help sustain them in the work that they're doing, creating that idea of wholeness. You can find my book on Amazon. And if you go to, and I can share it with you, Will, if you want to include it in the show notes, but there is a link and people can sign up for the book study until July 17th. We'll get started that day and sign up will be up until the date and then it will be shut off. But I'm looking forward to it. And there's several educators and leaders that are signed up for a variety of different reasons. And the thing I most look forward to is just learning about them and their story and how they are impacting education in their roles right now.
I'm super excited. And yes, I'm going to put all of that information on the show notes because any conversation with you in these resources is going to benefit going into the next school year. It just is. And thank you so much for helping us understand that, it is these deliberate practices that really need to be a part of our day. And beyond that. I'm blown away by this conversation, Dr. Kelly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate you having me here today.
All right. Take care. And yeah, I'll see you at the book study, but hopefully before then.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.